Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sharpest Call of Duty League podcast. This is Major One, Week 2. I am joined, as always, by my co-host CDLMetrics. How are you doing tonight? How'd you think of Week 1 here?
Yeah, it was good. I wasn't able to catch all 9 matches, but I was able to catch most of them. And the other ones I just brushed up on looking over the box scores and whatnot. But yeah, I thought it was an enjoyable first weekend. We had 3 sweeps, 3 game 4s, and 3 game 5s. So very even distribution of, mismatches or matchups or whatever you want to say. But for the most part, I thought matches went as expected. There were a couple interesting results here and there that we'll get into a little later, but yeah, overall, I think a good first weekend. I know we had some delays here and there on the broadcast. That's bound to happen. That happens every season, and it always happens early in the season when they're working out the kinks for all that sort of stuff. So hopefully those things get fixed over time. But yeah, enjoyable first week, and looking forward to talking about the week 2 matchups. We got 9 more again.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. It was good. I think I really like them. I like the way it looks. The COD, it looks probably one of the best looking CODs we've had. It reminds me a lot of Black Ops 4. It looks very similar to Black Ops 4. I think that's intentional. The maps are pretty good too. We need to see more though. I think there's going to be some map changes though, but we'll get into that in a second. Going on to the first week, I didn't have any picks. You had picks. That was apparently a bad idea. You went 1 and 2. But it's okay. No, look, this is the thing, right? It's first week. Right. I even said I'm not betting a lot. I'm just putting some stuff on here, and that's it. Right. I'm not touching a lot. I think it's just going to be like just some very basic bets here, and that's it. Again, save your powder. We got a lot more to go. This was going to be the worst week for not knowing anything. And I think overall the odds were mostly pretty good. It wasn't like an insane upset. I think the odds were pretty bang on there for that. So, anything you want to say about the bets for this week? From last week?
Yeah. So I didn't have the best week, obviously, just 1 and 3 in the picks. The Cloud9 versus Minnesota game was very competitive, so that was a close but not quite game. They weren't able to win either the searches or the overload in game 3, but they took both hard points, so the thesis was there. Had I taken them against the spread, it would have worked, but I risked a little more, and they didn't come through. So sad there, but hopefully that process was good. Same thing with FaZe Vegas, however they're going by. Yeah, I figured they could at least win one of those series, if not get to map 5 for both. They did win against Paris, so that was nice. And then, the LA Thieves series, they did get swept in, but all 3 maps were very close. So it was good to see that you don't want to get swept when you take a +1.5, but they did show that there's maybe not as big of a gap between them and LA Thieves as people initially thought. So yeah, some good process there, but unfortunately 1 and 3 overall. Hopefully better weeks ahead.
Yeah, I think I did also bet Vegas +1.5 against Thieves. That didn't work. And I actually bet Paris -1.5 against Vegas. So then I actually lost both of those. So if it makes it feel a little bit better, that's fine. But no, I actually thought that like after FaZe got swept by Thieves, I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, this Vegas team might actually be pretty bad. And then they did beat Paris, and I'm like, okay, now again, it was close, but at the same point in time, I don't know. I think maybe in that last day, FaZe figured something out there against Paris. Now maybe again, it's 1 game sample size. You definitely do not make definitive statements off of 1 game sample size. Looking at you, ESPN Monday morning shows, but that's okay. But again, this is the thing, right? Let's see. Again, 1 data point, positive data point for FaZe. They have been clearly behind the rest of the pack, very clearly behind Optic, probably a little bit behind Thieves as well. And I think Thieves played on Sunday too, right? They played off against who?
Falcons. Yes.
Falcons, and they swept them. So they looked a bit tighter. Or no, they lost game 1 against them, but they did look tighter in the other game. So we'll see. All right, moving on. CDL points contest update. So it has been announced. Yep, everybody was able to enter, and not many people did though. But maybe we could try to do some sort of mid-season one. We'll have to see. But this is the entry for us for the season. Somewhat similar, as in we both picked Paris and we both picked Seattle. I went for the strategy of just I like Toronto and I like Minnesota. Minnesota played Optic on Sunday, I believe, right? And they lost. Mm-hmm. They got it close. They did lose in 4, but they were able to win the game on hard point. So that was a little bit of help. Toronto only won their one game. Paris, of course, lost, and then I think Surge also lost as well. Again, I think I'm not sad. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be fine. I think these were some good picks, and we'll see. But again, we both seem to go for that same strategy of fading the top two, saying nope, these are way too expensive. I'm not blowing half my budget on one team. I think that you also agree with that strategy as well.
Yeah. So I was just with how Paris looked in the preseason tournaments and everything, like they looked pretty competitive against Optic and Thieves. And I think they played FaZe once or twice too, and they look comfortable against them. Now, they lost to them last week, but I think, the thesis I went with was like the gap between Paris and the top two maybe won't be quite as big as what the market suggests it's going to be. Like, I think Thieves are still a better team. I think Optic are still a better team. I would expect both of those top two teams to have more CDL points at the end of the year. But I think the gap between them and Paris will be like a reasonable amount of points, where we might go into Major 4 and say, hey, if Paris win this, maybe they can jump Thieves or Optic and get the 2 seed, or maybe if everything goes right, they could get the 1 seed. But yeah, it was more of a, just based on how this team has looked lately, it seems like a good price. So that is where I went with that. And then I went with the Onslaught approach, where we were not able to do this last year because of how the pricing worked for each team, but I was able to get 6 teams. So I took Paris and then the bottom 5 teams in price, with the thinking of, now these teams, obviously a lot of these teams at the bottom, like Surge and Ravens, aren't expected to win any majors or even like place top 3 probably at any major this year. But the thought is that the bottom of the, right, like G2, Miami, all the way down to Surge, I think year to year, it's really hard to predict this ordering of teams. And I'm hopeful that 3 of those 5 at the bottom, like, at least qualify for champs. Because if that's the case, they're exceeding expectations ever so slightly. Maybe they're not crushing them, but some really good teams around this range we had last year, like Breach, were priced about the same last year, and they exceeded their expected point total based on that. Miami Heretics were down here in 9th, 10th, 11th, way exceeded their expectation. So my hope is that these teams that are shaded towards the bottom finish middle of the pack, or maybe just above where they are initially, and maybe we get some surprise, like maybe Miami is not as good or G2 isn't as good down the stretch. So that's where I went. We'll see how that works. It might not be a good idea to fade the top 2 teams with how they've looked so far this year, but yeah, similar teams, but interesting to see how it shakes out with the 4 teams versus 6.
Yeah, I agree with that, I think. But it is interesting, though. You've bought, how many teams do you have here? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6. I only have 4. So you have 2 more teams than me. You're going for the mass approach. Let's see how well that plays out. So, again, let's see how this looks after Major 1. And I think we'll start to see some patterns there. And maybe it was a good investment. Maybe we're going to be sitting here and be like, we should have just bought Optic. Maybe. If Optic wins Major 1, it's going to be like, yeah, we should have just bought Optic. But anyway, moving on to league news. Again, these are the results of every game that happened. And I absolutely love this chart. It's so nice here how you can actually see exactly what was a 3-0, what was a 4, a 3-1, and then a 3-2. I absolutely love this chart. You go ahead and say this chart.
Sure. Yeah. So I just thought this would be helpful for us moving forward this year, is like having a chart to reference where we can look back on what happened last week. Like, I keep track of that in a separate spreadsheet I have, not in the PowerPoint slides that we use, but I just thought this is a good sort of diagram to show, how competitive each series was, what the matchups were. Like, I forget 2 days later, I'm like, I don't even know who played on Friday. That was so long ago at this point. So helpful to see those things, like, and good to check, like, not every game that is a sweep is equal to each other. Like, you look at the first game we had on Friday, Optic won pretty comfortably against Falcons. The search was a little close, went to around 10. But later Friday, we had a great LA Thieves versus Vegas matchup. It was a sweep as well, expected win for LA Thieves, but a 25-point hard point, another round 10 win in search, and then a 1-point or 1-goal win, whatever we're calling that, in overload was very close. It was the only, or I guess there was one other 1-goal win in overload on the course of the weekend. So very close series despite the sweep. And then you see some other interesting results there. Vegas on Sunday winning 3-2, but not winning any hard points, honestly, all weekend. So an interesting nugget there. G2, I should say. Minnesota able to take a map off of Optic where Falcons weren't, and we could go on and on. But yeah, just wanted to throw these in there. If there's anything that jumps out to you, let me know. But for the weeks going forward, I'll just keep including these just as reference points for us.
Yeah, I love this chart. And again, one thing I will point out just right off the bat, because in past years we've had I'm not sure who's done it. I think Doug has done it, or Easy Mac has done it a couple of years, where basically they say that the more sweeps and game 4 wins there are, the more skillful the game is, right? They say that basically if every map is 50-50, Toph, Vanguard, then basically then at that point then you're going to have far more likely to have game 5s than not. Then most games will go to a 4 or a 5. And this year, look, we've already had 3 sweeps. Now, again, it's questionable. That was Vegas, arguably one of the better teams. 2 of them were the worst teams, but a lot of game 4s there. That's a lot of game 4s, a lot of 3-1s. Again, it's still early too, and we're going to need far more data points. But again, we've had some game 5s, but not a lot of game 5s. A lot of these ended. Like only a third of all games went to a game 5. 2/3 ended in game 4 or earlier. So again, it's seeming like this is going to be a bit of a skillful cut. That's my indication on that. Yeah. All right. I think we'll move on now. Again, maps and modes. So do you want to talk about what was picked this week and what wasn't picked this week?
Yeah. So this is just kind of a look over how many times we played these maps and modes. Not necessarily how often they were in the series, but not played. These are maps that were actually played. And yeah, it seems like we have an issue with Blackheart Hardpoint. We didn't play it in one of the preseason tournaments, and there's some spawn issue, or I can't remember exactly what they said, but we're not playing Blackheart right now, so it's a 4-map rotation in Hardpoint. We'll see if that's fixed this weekend. I would guess it's probably not, but hopefully it will be by week 3, because week 3 is in January, so we have some time to fix that. But yeah, just some interesting sort of things to look at. Like, we didn't play any Exposure, Search, and Destroy. We didn't play any Scar Overload. We had a lot of Den Overload, which plays interesting. Like, I think Exposure, from what I watched, seemed a little better. We did have an 8-0 on Exposure Overload, but the map itself lends to some funness, I think. So hopefully we get more of that. But yeah, it's very early. Obviously, this is only like 9 maps of Overload and 12 to 15 hard points somewhere in there. Yeah, I'm sure these odds and percentages will adjust as we go, but yeah, just wanted to point these out. And I'll keep track throughout the year just to see if any get tossed from the rotation entirely because we're not playing them enough, or if we see some clear like front runners for most played hard points, most played searches, and that sort of thing. So I don't know. Anything jump off the page for you here, Robert?
No, other than just the no Blackheart. And we've had no Blackhearts, including in the play-in tournament. I grabbed, because Breaking Point has a lot of the free tournament ones. So I scraped all the ones that were between CDL and CDL teams to build my model out. And the first thing first, it was like, hey, there's no Blackheart here. And I'm like, okay. Immediately had to I just had to pretend one of them was Blackheart. This map was Blackheart. Because if not, then my model was returning an error, so it's okay. But again, not a great sign. Again, I think we'll have this back. They'll fix this, or this will become raid or something. We'll have to see. And more maps are being added too. We might see, again, I'm shocked Express is not in the Search and Destroy pool. That's a classic fan favorite. I think didn't we get another classic in the map pool with season 1, which I think came out a couple days ago.
Yes, I'm blanking on what it was, but I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this map pool might change. I don't know if it's going to change for week 3. I think it could, because I think at a certain point they're just going to be like, we don't care, just put the better maps in. So We'll have to see. But yeah, I think that could work there. Match previews. So going on to match number 1 here, we've got the Falcons versus the Ravens. Is -150 money line at Carolina +100, -1.5 +150, +1.5 -200. and then just Riyadh just favored across the board in every matchup. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this one? I'm calling up my model here, but I don't. Let me see here. I should have it here. But basically, I'm not playing a lot of these. I think my model has Riyadh favored here. Yes, it. Oh no, my model actually has Carolina favored here because I have earlier data from the preseason tournaments. So my model has Carolina favored here by a lot, but I don't completely trust that. So what are your thoughts on this one? Do you see this as competitive? Do you see this as non-competitive? What do you think?
Yeah, at first glance, the prices seem about right. I'm just working off of the two matches we saw for Riyadh last weekend. We only had one for Carolina. So that's going to be the tricky thing with a lot of these matchups is half the league played two matches and half the league played one last weekend. So we're not working off of a ton of data points. I like the idea of including preseason data into this. I know, yeah, Falcons did not look good in the preseason stuff. But again, a lot of that, like some teams, they just did not have a lot of time to prepare for those tournaments, whereas other teams had, and maybe they had some roster shuffling and who knows what. But yeah, I don't know. I get it, especially from the futures preview we did last week. Riyadh Falcons were expected to make champs. Ravens were not. They weren't necessarily on a whole nother tier, but like I think it's, at least through the first few matches we saw last week, it does look like Falcons are a better team. Now, Falcons played Optic and LA Thieves, so they're probably not going to look good, and they did not look great. They did scrape by that hard point in map 1 versus LA Thieves, so that is something. And then besides that, it was a lot of blowouts other than map 2 against Optic was a 6-4 loss. But the overload wasn't even close, and the other hard points were okay at best. Ravens played Breach on Friday. That was their only series. Again, another team that is viewed in that same tier as them. I think most people would say Breach are better, and that proved to be the case. It did go to a map 4 because Ravens won round 11 in map 2. But the other maps, we had a relatively close overload, 3-2, but the hard points were all Boston. So I think you can say Falcons definitely a better hardpoint team at first glance. Maybe Carolina can fix things in the other modes, but all things considered, price seems about right, but we'll see if that changes before Friday. I think these will stay similar to where they are now, though.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this one's a no play for me. I'm interested to watch it. I can't bet on Riyadh. I need plus money on Riyadh, and I think I need plus money on the Ravens, but probably more. I don't know. I think the Ravens are probably the better team. I think I agree with my model, but I don't know if I can get behind it. We'll have to see. I think personally, I'm just not going to touch this. But if I was to make a plan, this would probably be the Ravens. That'd be my bird pick for this game. Moving on to Friday match 2, G2 versus Boston. G2 minus 163 on the money line. Boston plus 120. Minnesota minus 1.5 plus 125. Boston plus 1.5 minus 175. I think let me check my model. I'm fairly sure my model has Minnesota here. Probably by a lot. Yeah, my model has Minnesota by a lot. It's a play here. I don't love that minus 165 on the money line, though. I have Boston is the favorites in the hard points, but a small favorite in the hard points. But Minnesota very clearly favored in the search, and then also in the overload. So I think Minnesota can probably win this in the minus 1.5, but I think the minus 1.5 is priced about right. I think I've got it priced at plus 150. Plus 125 is fine, but I think if this goes to a game 5, I don't see Minnesota losing the search to it. So I think there's probably some value in just Minnesota money line here. I think there's value in that. What do you think here?
Yeah, I do think Minnesota should be favored. I get the price, and I think, again, this is more of a stay away than anything for me. But yeah, again, thinking back on the futures preview from last week, these teams were in the same ballpark. Minnesota were ahead of Boston. But yeah, Boston, if they win that round 11 against Ravens, that's a sweep. Although the next overload was a 3-2. I think, yeah, just based on what we saw last week, Minnesota do look like the better overload team. They were able to pick off a hard point against Optic. That is not easy to do, but they did drop 2 close-ish ones to Cloud9. It's a lot of conflicting data. I think the edge Minnesota has is overload, but again, we've only seen a couple of those for each team. So yeah, I think I would actually price this more like minus 150 for Minnesota, but we're really like nitpicking at that point. So stay away from me. For the CDL points contest, I'll be rooting for Boston here, but yeah, these first 2 series are good like gauges for all the teams involved, because I think they're all in that same tier of mid to mediocre. And maybe if some of these teams can string together some solid wins against these teams, then they'll be able to separate themselves from the pack. If Minnesota come out and win this 3-1 fashion or sweep, and the maps are pretty comfortable, I think then it's okay, yeah, it should have been maybe minus 200 for Minnesota rather than minus 163. But again, if Boston can scrape their way by and pick off a map here and there, keep it close, I think it's good proof that, yeah, these teams belong in the same tier, and maybe that price should have been scrunched a little closer. So to me, the price right now is in the in-between of like, maybe Minnesota are really solid and maybe Boston are fine, but we'll find out for sure after this match on Friday. So stay away, but intrigued to watch this one for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. This one could be interesting. Next up, do we have? Yes, okay. We can use the arrow keys. Okay, Vancouver versus Toronto. I don't need my model to tell me which one's favorite here. Toronto minus 1,000, Vancouver plus 550. Toronto minus 2.5 plus 120. Surge plus 2.5 minus 163. This team, man, it's not good. I've got Toronto minus 860 on the money line. I don't see the value in the minus 2.5, but I probably should. It should probably be a minus 2.5. I think my model is just way too 50-50 on overload. I think that's the problem. And that will sort itself out. Again, it's super early in the season, but that stuff will sort itself out. I think I'm not sure the minus 2.5 is playable, but I think you could possibly look at something along the lines of like minus search spread for sure. Possibly a minus hardpoint spread, depending on what that number is. Do you see anything playable in this game or no?
It's tricky. I think if I had to pick something, I'd take Toronto to sweep. So we only saw one match for both of these teams, and I don't know, they went expected, but both you could make an argument underwhelmed. Like Surge went up against Paris, who we know are good, and got swept, and none of the maps were close. So that's an issue. They lost by 98, by 3, and by 3. So you would like to see them at least keep one of those maps close, and they weren't able to. And now, right, you could make the argument like, okay, Toronto are in the same tier as Paris. Like a sweep is likely. Maybe they can make it closer if Toronto are a step down from Paris, but it's still tricky. But Toronto, they played Miami, and based on the match previews we did last week, like it's clear that Toronto were priced in a way where it's like they are a cut above Miami, that's for sure. And Miami forced the game 5, but mixed result, like this was all over the board. Toronto 100-point club to map 1, 250 to 85. So you are sitting there after map 1 going, oh my goodness, there might be a huge gap between these teams. Miami come back and win around 11 in map 2. So take that for what you will. It's around 11. Those things can go either way sometimes, but good to see Miami win that. Like Miami, I'd say last season was like their success, their late season success was built off of being really good at search and destroy, and they got really hot to end the year, and that's how they made some noise at Major 3, Major 4, and Champs. So good to see them compete with Toronto in that mode. Then an 8-0 overload to Toronto, so that's as big of a blowout as you can get. Map 4, Miami bounced back with a 51-point win in hardpoint. So a solid, like anytime you're winning by 40 or 50 plus, that's a comfortable win. I wouldn't say that's a blowout. I wouldn't say that's close. I'd say that's what we expect in most cases. And then the final search, 6-3 Toronto. So all over the map with results. It is hard to pinpoint how good of a team Toronto is. I'm just going back to futures again, thinking this team is about as good as Paris is. And if Paris were able to sweep Surge pretty comfortably, I think Toronto can as well. Maybe a round 11 goes Surge's way, but it's really hard to see Hardpoint or Overload going their way. So I like Toronto ever so slightly, especially because you're getting plus 120. But yeah, I think Surge, just due to the sheer fact that we haven't seen either of these teams much, Surge could definitely take one of those 3 maps and make this somewhat interesting. But I prefer to have the Toronto side of things.
Yeah, I just don't know if that minus 2.5 is bettable though. I think it's gonna have to be some spreads if you're gonna touch this map at all. That's my take on that. Saturday, moving on to Saturday, match 1, Paris versus Thieves. Paris plus 125 on the money line, Thieves minus 175. Paris plus 1.5 minus 188. Thieves minus 1.5 plus 137. Basically dead even in the hard point and the overload. Thieves a favorite in the search. I have Paris as a pretty big favorite here. I've got a Paris 3-1, which I actually don't even hate. Again, that's using preseason data, and Paris very soundly beat Thieves a couple times, so that's definitely hurting them. I think in some cases, if you're just building a brand new model, you probably have Thieves favored because you would have seen Thieves crushing FaZe and then FaZe beating Paris. But I think that 3-0 from Thieves is a bit of a bit misleading. That was a very close 3-0, especially in the search and the overload. So I think the play here is probably Paris, probably a hard point spread, I'm not sure exactly. Let me see here. What do I have for the search? Yeah, I actually do have Paris favored in the search as well. So that might be a play. Again, pick some plays if you like a number. Some of those map plays involve far more what map it is rather than just it involves what the map is far more than who the teams are in the pregame stuff. But no, I think a small play on Paris here, especially on a plus 1.5 at some number, I think that's a very fair bet here. What is your play here?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I do Paris in this spot. I know, yeah, you made a good point of if you're just looking at the matches last week, like very easy to deduce that Thieves are a better team, right? They swept Vegas FaZe, who we expect to be a good team, about as good as Paris. And Paris matched up against Vegas, and it went to the Game 5, and they were not able to get it done. That being said, you make a good point that Paris's hard point might be better than Thieves, which is surprising to say. Like, you look at this Thieves team, and you just assume, like, they're going to be the best hard point team, or one of the best. They should be solid in search, and this overload game we don't know much about, but to me, Overload plays more like Hardpoint than Search. So, yeah, like, it's easy to be like, all right, Thieves should be a cut above. And I think by the end of the year, maybe we will see that. Like, Paris might be one of these teams early in the season that, I know they lost to Vegas, but we see it every year where there are teams that get ahead early and then maybe can't keep that momentum going through the rest of the season. Maybe they get caught by some other teams that make roster moves or what have you. But yeah, I don't know. I think Paris can hang with these guys. I don't mind the plus 1.5. It is a steep minus 188, but I don't see why they couldn't win this. Just going back on those preseason tournaments, these teams played a lot of maps in those tournaments, and Paris looked like the better team from those. I know last week Thieves definitely looked like the better team, but they might have some trouble in map 1 and map 4 specifically. Searches, I think Paris did not have a good week of search, but that can get corrected pretty easily, I think. And then Overload is still a pretty big wild card, I'd say. All things considered, yeah, like Paris plus 125, I don't see why not. Famous last words, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to this matchup. I love that it's the first one on Saturday. I think we're kicking things off right with this match. So I like Paris ever so slightly. I think Thieves should be favored still, but it should be pretty tight, all things considered.
Yeah, I think so too. It should be a very competitive game, but I think Paris should be favored in this game. Based on the preseason data, they should be. Based on last week, they shouldn't be. But I think the preseason data is probably at least something. A one-game sample size, especially Paris against FaZe, doesn't mean anything. And FaZe could just becoming better, right? If FaZe is getting better, then that kind of invalidates the fact that Paris is like worse than FaZe, which is worse than Thieves, right? It's just, okay, maybe Vegas is better now, and therefore Paris is still comparable, so it's better than Thieves, right? Again, these are the kinds of tricks and games you have to play with these kinds of analysis and stuff. Saturday, match 2. Again, we're not, this one isn't nearly as competitive. Optic versus Miami. Optic minus 3,300 on the money line. Miami plus 900, minus 2.5, minus 150. You're about a, what was that, 60% chance to sweep 3-0. That's not great. This is the second week of the season, guys. Miami plus 2.5, plus 110. Yeah, just the only closest thing is search. Optic did have some problems in the search. Basically your only shot here is the search. Like Miami is just gonna have to win the search if they even have a chance to not get 3-0'd. And that's it. But then if you're like, oh, okay, Miami could win the search, so then they're gonna cover the plus 2.5, then just bet the search spread. Like search spread. I think the play here would probably be the spread in the search or the spread in or the money search money line. But I don't know why you touch this, and I don't know why you touch this money line either. I wouldn't touch those. So that's my take on this, at least. Do you see any? Are you seeing any hope for Paris? Not Paris, for Miami in this game.
Not really to win, but I think they can definitely win one map. Like I really like that plus 2.5, plus 110, and like I get the hard point is like Optic is a huge favorite in that, and they're honestly minus 300 in map 2 is really big also. But I don't know. We only saw one match for both of these teams. I'm sorry, we saw 2 from Optic. They did slip up in a hard point against Minnesota. And again, going back to the Futures preview, Minnesota and Miami were right next to each other in terms of total team strength. Now, maybe that's built differently. Like maybe G2 are a better hard point team, Miami are a better search team, or however it might shake out. To me, I'm not really going to assume those things yet until we have more data points for each game mode. But one thing for certain is like Overload is Optics. Like Optic won easily in both of their series, and Miami got 0-8 versus Toronto. So that, yeah, not pretty. I expect Optic to win that mode, but Miami I think can hang in hardpoint and in search. Like I don't think they'll necessarily rip off like a hard point in both searches. That's a thin bet, but I think they're a solid team, and I just think this line is a little disrespectful after what both of these teams showed last week. Like Optic, I think, proved that they're the number one team. They handled business relatively easily, only slipped up once. And Miami hung around with what we expect to be a really good Toronto team. Yeah, I would price this a little closer. Honestly, I'd probably make Optic to sweep like even money, maybe. Minus 150 is just way too steep. Yeah, I prefer the Miami side of things here. Hopefully they can make it interesting.
Yeah, maybe they can make it interesting. We'll see. This game is Saturday afternoon. This is probably going to be around half-ish time of Army-Navy. So, again, there are far less football games now on the weekends now than there were last week. Call of Duty's finally getting its spot alone in the light here for some of these games. Saturday match 3, Vancouver versus Cloud9. Wow, barn burner here. Cloud9 minus 334 on the money line. Vancouver plus 240. Cloud9 minus 1.5, minus 138. Vancouver plus 1.5, plus 100. There might be. What do I have here? I have some hope. No, not really. Okay, no, I have this price about right. I have minus 363 for Cloud9, so that's about right with you minus the fig. There might be some chance for Vancouver to cover the plus 1.5. Yeah, I've got the minus 122 to cover the plus 1.5. So some slight value on the plus 1.5. But again, my model is a bit generous in the plus 1.5s. So I don't know. There's probably some. You could probably pick away at maybe the hard point here. Or yeah, probably. I think you probably pick away at the hard point in this game. I think you maybe say Vancouver could do something in hard point. That's among one of the easier modes to fix, or maybe search as well. But yeah, this doesn't look particularly great for Surge. I think, again, part of the reason why we both picked Surge was, one, because they were only $2, and 2, because they were very likely to have a team change very soon, right? Because of that, they could have anyone on their team. They could have a really good rookie, right? So we have no idea. So that's one of the reasons why we picked Vancouver there. Yeah, I'm not seeing it for Vancouver yet. Maybe in a bit, maybe with a team change. But for now, yeah, I'd have to take Cloud9 here. But I think, again, you might be able to find some small value in some of the game lines. What do you see?
Yeah, feels about right. Like your model has it very close to what it's priced at. Tricky, again, like I think Cloud9 proved that they're at least league average-ish in hardpoint after beating Rocker G2, twice. I'm going to do that a lot because their logo is the same as what it's been the last several years. So Cloud9, good showing in hardpoint. They got to fix the other game modes. Surge, obviously, we're not competitive against a really good Paris team. I don't know. It's so tricky just because we haven't seen either of these teams much at all. Even in the preseason, we didn't see either of these teams that much. I know Cloud9 had a good run at that Monster Launch Invitational, so I think that's backing this number a little and probably inflated their futures just a smidge. But yeah, I think Cloud9, step above Surge. I don't think that's a shocker to anyone. Feels like a 3-1 win, and the fact that it's priced around even money for that to happen, yeah, it all feels about right to me. So I think an interesting one to watch just to see if we get a weird result. If Cloud9 do come out and sweep, I think that's definitely... I don't want to get trapped in this thought of everyone's going to 3-0 Surge because they're the worst. I'm sure they'll get swept a lot, but I still don't think they're like even close to the level that Vegas Falcons were last year. That was a team where it was like, this team has no hope. I do think Surge has some underdog in them where they can win some of these series against these middle-of-the-pack teams. Maybe they could against Cloud9. I just think Cloud9 are the better team here and will take care of business until Surge can start to figure themselves out a little. So I'm going to avoid everything here, but Cloud9 3-1 feels pretty spot on to me.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair bet here. I think a 3-1 seems pretty likely here to close out Saturday. So moving on to Sunday, Riyadh versus Boston. Boston is the favorite. This one, -138 versus Riyadh +100. And then Boston, it's 55-45 down the line. I have it very close as well. I have Boston -107 as the favorite here. So a little tighter, but still not a lot of value on Riyadh there. Again, this is going to be a spot play. This is going to be how they looked earlier in the season, earlier in the week. I think Boston is probably better at hardpoint, but I think Riyadh is better in search, right? So if Riyadh could steal a search, maybe the overload, maybe steal one of the hard points, Boston's in a bit of trouble here. Again, right off the bat, Riyadh plays Carolina. If Riyadh beats Carolina, then okay, then we're talking here. But if they lose, this might be a place. Because the thing is, that Boston-Carolina game last week, it was a 3-1. But if, again, as we go back to that, to remember back to the image there, the grid we had there earlier in the thing, it was a 3-1. But remember, they did only lose the overload by 1 point. They and then, they lost the hard point. But again, there was a path there for that to go to a Game 5. Right, a Game 5 search, and then who knows what would have happened in Game 5 search. So that match might have been a bit more competitive than people thought it was. So I will say that I think on some level, if you're boss, like Riyadh could win this game. I don't, even if Carolina crushes Riyadh, I think there's a case here that Riyadh could be like, if Carolina beats Riyadh, and then all of a sudden Riyadh's like +120, 130, 150, there might be some value on Riyadh. I think that could possibly be a bit of a play here. Do you see that in this, or do you just would you support Boston in this one?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think if Riyadh had shown a little more against those really elite teams, I'd be more into it. But the fact that Boston handled themselves against Ravens, and I know what you mean, like that it was close to going to a Game 5, but Ravens' only win was a round 11 in Map 2 as well. Like, you could say that flips, and then Boston get a sweep. I don't know, the one, like, sticky thing, especially early in the season, like, sticky stat that I like is just looking at hard points, because we get a good idea of, we're going to play a lot of those, because we usually get 2 every series, and there's just, due to the fact that, like, it's a long game, and the point spreads in that game can go anywhere between 1 and 200. Like, the more reps we get, the more we see, okay, Boston are consistently beating these teams by 50 or 75 or 100 or whatever it might be. Like, they showed up against Ravens pretty well, won both hard points relatively comfortably. Riyadh were able to get the 1 off of LA Thieves, but outside of that, kind of shaky everywhere else. I don't know, but I get what you're saying about Riyadh could win this. Like, for sure they could win this, and it might just be this thing where all those teams that are like 8th, 9th, 10th in the league, like the odds for them to beat each other all shift ever so slightly just based on what's happened recently. Like, we could play this series this weekend, and then maybe next weekend, if Riyadh were to win this, these odds would just be flipped. And then Boston win that, and then they flip back and flip back. So to me, to have this priced as close as it is makes sense. I do still like Boston more. Like, I get why they're favored. The plus 162 is pretty nice if you want to buy into the fact that the hard point is a step above. But I like that Boston have a team that's basically what it was last season. They look good in their one match against Ravens. Were able to win 3-1. In Riyadh, I wanted a little more last week. So if I had to pick something, I'd lean to the Boston side of things here. I do think they're a little better, but that is mostly reflected in the price anyway. Boston, but this should be a really good season. Another good match one of the day here on Sunday. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a good match on Sunday. This one should be very competitive. Moving on to match 2 on Sunday. This one is a dead even. Miami versus Cloud9, minus 120 each way. I actually have New York favored this one, which actually makes some amount of sense, I think. My Heretics are just a worse version of themselves than last year, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think this Cloud9 team is not great, but I think this is a play against Miami. I've got Cloud9 is minus 172 favorite, and I price the minus 1.5 at 161. So I have basically market value here, but if you think about it, I think it's on Saturday, Cloud9 plays. If they win that game against Surge, which seems likely, and again, even when Toronto plays Miami, Optic plays Miami on Friday, this line could be very different. This line could be something like minus 140, minus 160, minus 150 by the time it kicks off. So if you want to grab it now, you might get some better value. You might get some good closing line value on that now. Is that the way you'd see this game, or do you see a case for Miami?
Yeah, the case for Miami is tricky, right? I think you can look back to their series against Toronto and be like, they almost won that, and Cloud9 should be an easier opponent. So there's that. And then Cloud9, I'd say, played to expectation. Like, the fact that they won both hard points is nice. The fact that the other 3 maps were not close is concerning. So at first glance, Cloud9 hardpoint looks better. Miami Search looks maybe slightly better. Overload's still the wild card. Obviously, Miami got slammed. Cloud9 were somewhat competitive. So I think I'd lean like Cloud9 should be favored slightly, like somewhere around minus 120. Like, not by much, and that's right where it is. So if it was like fair odds, it would be maybe Cloud9 minus 120, Miami plus 120. But yeah, man, another one where we're really going to figure out like where these teams fall in the pecking order, because going back to the futures preview, these teams were really close to each other. I do think Miami were maybe a touch higher than Cloud9 at that time. So maybe we've had enough data at this point to say Cloud9 are catching up to them, but I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine in this one. The fact that your model priced it almost spot on makes me shy away even more. This feels like a very coin flippy game. I'll cheer for Cloud9 because of the CDL points contest, but yeah, this one could very well go either way.
Yeah, I think it's probably not the smartest bet. If you want to bet Cloud9, I'd say bet them now because you get some closing line value on it. But outside of that, this could just be a coin flip. There's a lot because this is this one, and then there's 2 coin flips right here on Sunday, right off the bat here. So that could be good. And then actually, I think we're going to move on to another kind of ish coin flip game: Toronto versus FaZe. FaZe minus 175. So FaZe a bit of bigger favorite here. Toronto plus 125, minus 1.5 plus 125, plus 1.5 minus 175. Again, FaZe just across the board, favorites across everything. I've got FaZe priced as minus 288 on the money line. I think a lot of that has to deal with them beating Paris. But I think I have this going to 5. I very clearly have this going to 5. I don't know. There's an argument here for Toronto. The thing is, again, and as we talked about, 1 game sample size, right? Everybody saw FaZe beat Paris and was like, that's it, FaZe is back, they're good now. That's not how that works. We've seen that a lot in the NFL. That's not how this works. No, I the angle on Toronto here. Again, I'd love to see that line be a bit better, but I think Toronto's got a shot here. I'd love to. This is gonna be a great game. I want to see this game, but I'm not writing Toronto off here yet. Do you see the case for Toronto, or do you think that phase is the play here?
No, yeah, I absolutely see the case for Toronto. I think, yeah, we might be seeing it skewed because of that FaZe versus Paris game we just saw on Sunday. And FaZe was not expected to win because we have seen Paris be so good for a couple weeks now. But again, their win, it was a game 5, and they did not win a hard point, and they weren't even close. So that's still concerning to me. They did not win their hard point against LA Thieves either. Now that's a tough opponent, and that one was pretty close. But I got to see something in hardpoint because I did see Toronto win 250 to 85 against what we expect to be a solid Miami team. They out-searched them. They only lost in round 11 there, and they killed them in overload. Like, Toronto, I know it was against Miami, and Miami aren't expected to be this elite team, but their individual map scores, I think, are pretty promising, even though it went to that map 5. And going back to the Futures preview, these teams were very close to each other. FaZe were just a tick above Toronto in most of those, like in the win total, in the odds to win champs, and all of that. FaZe were a touch above Toronto. To me, this spread, this money line, like everything here seems to indicate that FaZe are maybe distancing themselves, and I just don't think that's the case. So I would squeeze these prices a little closer to each other. I think Toronto are very live to win this. So, yeah, give me anything on them. I think totally fair price. I think it's even moved up. I want to say Toronto were plus 120, now plus 125. So we'll see how that shakes out by the time we get to Sunday. But I think Toronto are super live to win this one.
Yeah, if that number keeps going up, I'm totally fine with that. So, yeah, let's go from there. Modern Warfare. Again, no picks from me this week for that. At least not yet. I will have picks after Christmas because this is the last episode before Christmas. But I will say I do like your picks. I like Toronto versus Vegas. I like Paris versus Thieves. And yeah, I don't hate the idea of the plus 2.5, but I feel like the better play is just bet the search money line. I think that's the play here. But again, you can find some value in that with maybe you find value and you say, oh, okay, maybe they rip off a hard point or something. You never know. Maybe Vegas, maybe Miami does something, right? So I am playing all of those. Are not my official picks, but I do all of them. What do you have? Any other plays you're thinking of this week? Or
I was considering Boston against Minnesota, but that seemed about right. Boston's plus 120 to win that. Again, that's more of just I think these teams are in the same tier, maybe. Like, I think Minnesota might just be a touch overrated by the market, but again, that's TBD. That was it. I think you can make a case for maybe Cloud9 against Miami, but I never like I didn't want to pick Miami spread against Optic and then go against them with New York. So I think those are you can make a case for pretty easily. But yeah, the theme I guess with the picks are fading those elite teams. Like I think Toronto and Paris are maybe not as good as Vegas and LA Thieves, but I think they're close, and I think one of them could win their series against their opponent. So that's the idea with playing both of those. And then Miami, the whole thing is just like, I know what you're saying about maybe just go search, right? Like the search in that would be Miami is plus 225 to win map 2. That I think is great as well. I just think that maybe the hard point could come through. Like I wouldn't want to be on the search, they win the hard point, lose the map 2. You know how that sort of goes sometimes. So I'm just like, take the plus 2.5, you get both covered, and you still get plus 110. So that's pretty nice. But yeah, fading the really good teams. What could go wrong?
yeah, all right. So that is it for us. We will be back after New Year's. Long bit of an off season for us. I guess a bit of an off season break. Almost a month. We will be back in a month from now to preview Major 1 Week 3. Again, there's only going to be 2 more weeks left for this, and then there will be the Major in late January. Other than that, yeah, I think I'm excited for some COD this week. Sad we're not going to have COD for a few other weeks, but it's Christmas time, and there's going to be other stuff to watch. That's okay. But yeah, other than that, anything else you want to add to that?
Just excited. We're going to get 9 more data points, or I guess more if you consider each map a data point, which I do. So yeah, just excited to get more information on these teams. I think we have a lot of series that we're unsure about, which is fun early in the season. It's fun to see how these teams shake out early and assert themselves into the league. So yeah, really looking forward to the matches this weekend. Yeah, looking forward to the break. It always comes so quick because the season starts in December and Christmas is there in just a few weeks' time. Yeah, looking forward to the break. Looking forward to coming back in January and talking week 3. But until then, yeah, I think we'll
Yeah.
see you guys.
See everyone. Have a good Major 1, Week 2. And we will see you in the new year for Major 1, Week 3. Other than that, see everybody.